Happy Friday. Welcome to this week's edition of our Coffee Break Technology series, continuing in Cybersecurity month of October with some more discussion around cybersecurity, and today more focus around building that culture that we've talked about a little bit, and ensuring that your users are bought into it, you guys are bought into it, because we'll talk a little bit further about kind of the levels of defense with security, and our users and our employees are definitely that first line. So excited to have Josh Moore with us this morning. Josh, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Jeff. Thank you for asking.
Good. I'll have you introduce yourself and give a little background here in a second. Wanted to remind everyone to use this opportunity or use an opportunity throughout today's discussion, the next 25 minutes or so, to post any questions. We'd love to be able to answer those real time as things come up. If this can be, somewhat interactive, that would be great. And also at the end, I'll talk a little bit about what we're building and we'll be focusing on in November. We're going to pivot from cybersecurity to collaboration and some of the tools that are available. Some of our, besides the Cybersecurity Month, which has been very popular from a webinar attendee perspective, we've seen probably our greatest attendance in the past when we talk about Microsoft Teams and how users can better use Teams, how administrators can better set it up, and tips, tricks, some real life demonstration type hands-on webinars is what we're planning in November. So we will talk about that at the end. All right, Josh, if you could maybe spend a couple minutes giving everyone some of your background and kind of what you do for us here at Levity.
Yeah, of course. So I've been in information technology for a lot longer than I'd like to disclose, but well over 20 years. I've worked in a variety of verticals on the other side of the desk. So Director of Information Technologies for companies like Batteries Plus, BE Aerospace, and most recently Dental Associates, handling anything from security initiatives, related to the Department of Defense, PCI security, HIPAA compliance. So I've walked the walk with many organizations and feel like I've done a good job of creating a cybersecurity culture and really want to help the panel or the attendees today.
Great. And we're happy to have you as a solutions architect to help our clients work through those issues as they build out their plan. So again, I think I mentioned the Q&A, but in your Zoom control panel, there is a Q&A section. So that's the place, if you can, to post a note. If you post it in chat, that's okay. I'm monitoring that as well. So we're really here to talk about building a culture focused on cybersecurity. And when we say focused, obviously, when you think of your culture within your organization, the top three things probably aren't cybersecurity. They might be for us, but they may not be for you. It's about having people engaged in a healthy environment and a good, humble workforce that's focused on doing the right things for your clients. But it is important that we have intention around building cybersecurity into the way that your users think, the way they behave, pausing a minute before they do some things. So we talk about that about users, but Josh, what do you see as one of the greatest weaknesses in most organizations when it comes to cybersecurity prevention? I kind of gave that away a little bit, but
yeah, in today's day and age, you really need to look at the threat vector that we're seeing out there, and these foreign actors that are trying to get information from organizations are really targeting users, whether that be through email. We've seen an elevation in text messages that are meant to be able to, hey, you've got a package out front, click this link, and these kind of attacks are really an indicator that they're targeting our weakest element of our security posture, which I find is generally the users, right? And they need to be educated. So that's one of the things I think organizations need to be focused on.
Yeah. So what would be the first thing that you would suggest our listeners start with when they're going to address this? I mean, education, you just mentioned. How do they go about doing that? Where would they start?
Yeah, so for these users, they have a really good opportunity There's a good amount of confusion. They're bombarded via the news with these attack vectors. It really starts by opening up a conversation. Management talking to employees about cybersecurity and their role in protecting corporate data. And by opening that dialogue, organizations start to build that cybersecurity culture. Once they start to discuss these cybersecurity issues, there needs to be that regular touch point, and staying on top of current events, and making sure that they know that these issues don't only impact their role within the business, but also their personal lives.
Yeah, that's true. I know we've talked about this in webinars in the past, but it's pretty common, and I'm sure most people listening will kind of shake their heads in agreement that most people use similar passwords personally and in business. So if your password is breached on your AD credential, most likely it has some correlation or some similar similarities to your banking password and your social media passwords and things like that. So that they can definitely impact each other.
Yeah, and you make a good point, right? And these passwords that are being used, we all try to do the same thing where we use some deviation. Part of that culture that best in breed organizations are using to create cybersecurity awareness is rolling out password management tools, so that the organization is kind of helping them, even in their personal lives, being able to manage access to their various systems. So, having that relationship, an employee to an organization is critical to help creating that culture. Let them know you're protecting their best interest.
So you just mentioned that as a best practice, potentially looking at password managers or the systems that can create super complicated passwords that people don't necessarily have to create on their own or remember. What other successful things have you seen organizations do that you've worked in or with?
Yeah, and the other thing that there's definitely a lot of tools that can be utilized, and you should really check those check boxes, right? Firewalls, client security tools like antivirus. The big one that I think, the big two actually that I think a lot of people are investing in are, multi-factor authentication. It's a must-have. We see it all over the place. Bank accounts, even accessing Amazon, for doing orders. The other one that I find really helps to create that cybersecurity culture that we're talking about today is awareness training. Being able to, run simulations, do phishing campaigns to be able to identify, which one of those users are clicking on the link, that's embedded in an email, or even worse, which ones are giving away their password. And having those all be able to feed into a central dashboard. So you really have visibility to provide future coaching.
Very good. So, I'm looking at the attendee list. We have some pretty similar names of people who have, or some recognizable names, I should say, of people who have attended some previous cybersecurity conversations. So, obviously it's important to them. And I think everybody's trying to figure out where the best place is to start. So what do you recommend organizations should do when they start? And, what do you recommend they not do to start?
Yeah, so organizations that are going to be really focused on a cybersecurity initiative across the board, it all starts with assessing the current state of your security architecture. Frameworks like NIST for the DoD, ISO 27001. These frameworks can help give you something to measure your internal security measures by. Out of that, you create a matrix, right? What initiatives can you take on to be able to really improve your security posture? And in that matrix, you score, right? How much do these projects cost? What's the complexity to invest in them? And these types of things. And then out of that, come up with a plan to be able to execute on the individual initiatives. But throughout that plan, always keep your eye on securing company data in relationship to current market trends, and be flexible with that plan. That's my biggest recommendation.
Yeah, so evaluation of current state, look for gaps and holes,
Yep.
and then try to put a plan together to evaluate the best places to move forward, making sure that you're addressing those key areas.
Yep.
Okay. So we systems and infrastructure and back-end stuff. I mean, I feel like that's often what people initially think of when they talk about cybersecurity. And we started this conversation about users. What are some best practices to start to change users' behavior as it relates to cybersecurity?
Well, the awareness training is absolutely critical for that. I talked a little bit about simulated phishing campaigns, those feeding into a centralized dashboard. The tools can also then be used to identify, what are users confused about? What are these simulated attacks? What are they showing? It really gets people on their toes, right? Because each email you review, you need to be able to check, hey, are these links taking me to where they're saying they're taking me? What to look for in a suspicious email. And then, that can give you guidance on what kind of training modules that you want to release. So awareness training by companies like Mimecast and their tools can, already have pre-made modules that address a lot of cybersecurity concerns. And they're not just bland, oh, we're going to have to watch an hour-long video and take a detailed test. No, they can be fun videos. They can be quick to consume. And then you can even do little quizzes afterwards to make sure that they've consumed that information. Without that whole life cycle management of user awareness, it's really difficult to be able to ascertain whether your users are really absorbing the content and making changes in their daily work schedule. The other thing that you need to do is there needs to be a top-down approach for organizations when they approach user education and awareness training. You want to make sure that in manager inline meetings with business units and things like that, that there's discussions around risks that are currently coming across email, cell phones, and a variety of other attack vectors. By having those regular dialogues, it helps really create that culture around cybersecurity awareness and gets your people to a point where they can respond appropriately in the face of a threat.
Yeah, I think that's a critical question. I mean, the frontline team that is receiving, invoices or POs, or the sales team that's receiving, inquiries. We kind of think of that group as the one that we need to make sure that we train and have awareness. But the reality is that the leadership in the organization needs to, number one, be aware and bought into the fact that they could be target. We hear about the large organizations. I mean, ironically, Target, the retail store, had an issue. They were a target. That was intentional. There are other scenarios where you see the attack and you go, well, that makes sense that somebody would want to go after their data. Target processes how many credit cards a day, and if you can capture some of that, that would make a lot of sense. The reality is that the bad guys are doing big, broad sweeps, kind of like a burglar walking down the street looking for unlocked doors. They don't really target a house. They're targeting a house that has an unlocked door. And large or small, rich or poor, for-profit, not-for-profit, the bad guys are looking for open doors, and that in some cases could just be a user. So I think the first step is awareness that everyone is subject to this type of activity, and you've got to take preventative steps to protect what's important to the organization. I think Shara mentioned on our webinar a couple weeks ago, which I think is really important, is that some people say, well, we don't have enough, we don't think that we have anything that bad guys would find valuable. And the reality is they don't care whether they find it valuable. They care that you find it valuable. Because if they get access to it or lock it up, they're going to expect you to pay to get it back or to get access to it again. And so I think that leadership, ownership, executive level buy-in that you have risk and that there is a threat that could be targeted at you is a really important step to not only be aware of, but to make sure that your team knows that you're aware of it, so that there's some intention behind the training and the discussions.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Whale fishing, they're really targeting senior execs. So building that awareness, building that culture is inclusive of everybody at every level across the organization. So absolutely critical. You're right.
A lot of people have heard, many of these things that we're talking about. Sometimes it's repetition, sometimes it's timing when some of this starts to settle in. But what are some myths that maybe you think would be valuable to debunk?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of organizations that I walk into and talk to about cybersecurity, they kind of think that just that client security and a firewall is enough to be able to protect their infrastructure, their corporate data. And really, it needs to be a layered, multi-pronged approach to be able to be successful with your security. So that's the biggest myth I see. And those companies that are just investing in those basic tools to be able to provide cybersecurity protection are at risk. They're not doing the necessary things to be able to eliminate data loss and things like that. So, multi-factor authentication, improved client security with, better security operations center management of client tools, and endpoint detect and respond, the user awareness training, mobile device management to ensure that, if those devices fall into the wrong hands, that you can wipe them. It really is a spectrum of things that need to be done to be able to protect your internal infrastructure. And nowadays, just AV and firewall simply aren't enough.
So somebody who has responsibility within their organization to make these kinds of decisions just heard you list off a whole bunch of things that they would need, and those usually come with big dollar signs. So and that right now, and a lot of organizations are dealing with COVID related business impacts and are watching expenses pretty tightly. So what would you recommend in given that as a consideration? There's not big fat checkbooks where people are just willing to write huge checks for cybersecurity. Where would you suggest that organizations start without spending a lot? And I do have a question from the audience that I'll ask next.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you got to weigh it out from a risk versus reward standpoint. What's the cost to the business of not doing these things is also an important factor. But to answer your question directly, it's really looking at the tools that you've already invested in, and potentially, taking advantages of features and functionality that you don't have, right? So if you have a cloud-based provider for an application, maybe they have a multi-factor authentication checkbox that you could check on that to be able to better secure your environment. Maybe you already have Office 365 and want to extend your authentication for single sign-on to some of these cloud providers so you can kind of manage what policies that you have as far as password length and complexity and things like that to ensure those cloud partners websites are protected. You can also do it where that cybersecurity culture that you're trying to get going in your organization. You could provide different links to security organizations, to your inline manager over internal business units, and create that dialogue, maybe a monthly newsletter about cybersecurity. A lot of other organizations have been successful gamifying cybersecurity awareness and being able to provide, hey, if you go breach free or incident free for a period of time, maybe there's a Starbucks gift card or something like that. So the way you go about that and take it at a reasonable cost is looking for those investments that you've already made and really generating some level of cybersecurity intelligence within your staff. So.
Okay, great. Good, thank you. Question that came in, we were talking earlier a little bit about awareness, either training or just bringing awareness. The question is, how do you suggest to measure, report, and manage users' behavior to lower that risk?
Oh, great. Okay. Well, so the inside of awareness training tools, when you run these phishing campaigns, and you can do it where there's an artificial intelligence, they may scan your mailbox to say, hey, this is somebody in accounts payable, or hey, recently they've been working on, benefits for their children, or, maybe they're in a manufacturing role. So these phishing campaigns are actually targeted to try to trick people. And all of that information, gets fed into a centralized dashboard. So you can quickly see, who opened the email, who clicked on the link, who actually gave away their credentials. And you can have that in a central dashboard to be able to see, which one of your users are the weakest link in that security chain, and be able to not only run that once, because it's a journey. You don't do it once, all right, everybody's good, and we'll come back to it next year. No, it's something that you continue to run. You don't announce it, but then you look in that dashboard and you see these are the areas that we really need to work on. We need to focus on these users. And then those, educational campaigns, you can, be able to do pointed training to those individuals that really struggle, and maybe pull them aside, remind them about how important cybersecurity is to your organization, and ask if they need further assistance in understanding. That's what the power of the awareness training tools really provides to an organization.
All right, good. Well, if there are additional questions, I'd like people to feel free to throw those into the Q&A section. Of course, all of the things that Josh was just talking about, whether it's starting with an assessment or finishing with a discussion around risk and impact and how those things can all come together and which solutions would be the right fit. We have guys like Josh and other resources that can help you through that discussion, whether you're a current client of Alevity or a future client of Alevity. So if we can help walk you through those and maybe help to maximize the potential security prevention tools or processes with the budget that you have available. If you're planning for 2021 budget and would like to get an idea of the things that you should build into that, now's a great time to start to have that discussion. Whether there's a little in the budget or a lot, we want to make sure that you're maximizing the opportunities that you have to protect your data and protect your organization. And of course, we are here to help. Um, Josh, anything? Doesn't look like additional questions are coming in. Any last words or thoughts for the group?
No, I would just echo what you said, right? We're here to help. It all starts with assessing the current state of your environment and security posture, and then really, organizing those tasks to shore up those gaps, and creating a plan around that. So I would love to work with people on that, and let me know. So thank you for joining today.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So as I mentioned, some upcoming events. Be on the lookout for some announcements and invites to 3 events, 3 coffee break sessions that we're going to run in November. We're going to do those kind of, 3 weeks in a row, not the week of Thanksgiving, and focus on kind of real life demos. We're going to be sharing a screen. You're going to be seeing, a mouse move, and us walk through teams and some tips and tricks and ideas for users. So, that if your team needs to get some education and some training, this would be kind of a start to that education. It's definitely not going to be complete. Nobody's getting an associate's or a bachelor's degree coming out of that half an hour session, but it could be a great start to get people thinking about how to use it. It's more than a chat tool. It's more than just for meetings. There's a lot of great capabilities within Teams. The second week is going to be more focused on the administration or setup of Teams and some of the advanced capabilities that are available within Teams that you'd need to make some business decisions or at least organizational decisions about deploying. The third week, we're going to talk about live events, Teams live events, which is a developing tool that allows you to do some really interesting things from a production level as well as a distribution level to large audiences, whether that's a town hall within your organization or a big external presentation that you want to do and you want to control that. We'll spend some time talking about live events, which if you have Teams, you have live events. It's an included component. And then we're also going to have a thought leadership webinar, and we're still working on a little bit of that data, that content. I won't release that yet, but look for that invite in your inbox, and please register. Thanks again for joining us during this entire month and our focus on cybersecurity. We had a lot of repeat attendees at our webinar, so thank you for that. Our email series, I think, was really well received, and we got a lot of good feedback out of that. So we're looking to wrap up the month. Hopefully, we've helped educate you to make your organization more secure and less at risk. And if there's additional things that we can help with, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you for your business.